you came in. My apologies.
No problem. I'm sorry I was late.
John Wirtz here, and we're here with Gina Parker, and she's running for Court of Criminal Appeals, Place 3. It's December 11, 2019. With me is Larry Rogers, Bob Bagley, David Smith, and soon-to-be Dale Fessenden. So Gina, as we discussed a few minutes ago, if you like, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Sure.
And you open up with up to 5 minutes on a opening speech, and then we'll do the Q&A after that.
Sure. Y'all give me a 30-second warning because I can talk.
Well, thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank y'all for doing this. I really think it serves the people well and helps people to know the candidates. So, well, I'm originally from Waco, Texas, and I'll just start with how I got involved politically. And my mother was the vice chair of the McLennan County Party in Waco, Texas. We were involved with Christian Coalition and registering people to vote through the churches. And as a result of all that involvement, I decided I wanted to go to law school. Also had read Phyllis Schlafly's book at the time, Sweetheart of the Silent Majority, and was very influenced by her. And applied for law school, was accepted to Baylor Law School, graduated there, and from there I left Baylor Law School, went to work as a prosecuting attorney in Bell County, Texas. And that's where I got a lot of trial experience, tried a lot of cases with Lieutenant Colonel there, which was great experience. So I've had a lot of really key people in my life that have been former military lieutenant colonels, and he was one. And so, in fact, we had the reputation, they called us the deadly duo. So we were, it was a lot of fun practicing with him because he's very structured and well organized, and so am I. So we got along great. And that was a really good experience. I also did juvenile law during that time, and that's another area of the law that I found very interesting. I got a lot of misdemeanor and felony experience doing juvenile cases. Spent a lot of time in the courtroom with regard to the juvenile law. And then I did worked with bond screening, case screening, just about everything that you would do with regard to misdemeanors. And then I also did some CPS work there where we handled Child Protective Services cases. From there, I left that office and went back to Waco, which is my hometown, and worked for the McLennan County District Attorney's Office. And that was an interesting experience. I went to work under Paul Gartner, who was the Republican DA at the time. However, Paul left, he lost, and so I ended up working for a Democrat. That did not go so well for me at the time. So they were dismissing repeat offense DWIs, third, fourth, fifth offender DWIs. So I began to not agree to continuances. So the defense attorneys would come in, and once I found out they were going to prosecutor shop, I would set the trial on the case on the trial docket. As a result of that, I was reprimanded by my boss. Finally, because of a .18 breath test, which is over twice the legal limit, and the guy was a school bus driver, I ended up resigning. Went in to see my boss and said, hey, this is not going to work for me. If I can't respect you, I can't work for you. And, you know, our job as prosecutors is to protect the public, and we were not doing that. So that was one of my first encounters with the good old boy system. And so from there, I started my own law practice. And I've been in private practice since 1991, and I've had a broad-ranging legal career. I've done a lot of business law as well as criminal law. I've predominantly done criminal law over the last 20 years outside of what the business law I do for myself, my brother, and my husband. And so, but that's all been really good experience across the board. I had my own law practice. I've not worked for another firm, so I've had to manage a payroll, be responsible. I've had a big staff. At one time I had 9 people working for me, had a large payroll, very busy. So really a lot of experience managing, administrating, being able to handle a large volume of work, as well as practicing law and understanding the law. Also, another key, I think, to my experience has been my time on the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. I was originally a Bush appointee and then reappointed by Governor Perry, who I was sharing with John, just endorsed me last week in Fort Worth in front of about 300 people. His first day back in Texas, he got up and endorsed me, had me stand up and said, hey, I want you to vote for Gina. She's the constitutional conservative in the race. And so thank you to Governor Perry for that endorsement. I've been advised that I'm going to be receiving the Texas Right to Life endorsement as well, but that's not been publicized yet. So I'm excited about those things, but starting on this agency gave me the opportunity to see inside what happens with regulatory law. And that was a real eye-opener. We regulated 21 different industries. I served originally as a commissioner and then 1 year as chairman of that agency. I served there in a quasi-judicial capacity. And what that basically means is that we heard appeals from the State Office of Administrative Hearings, and we would make decisions on those appeals before our agency.
All right, real good. Thanks very much
Sure.
for that. So why this office? Why this particular office, place 3, rather than, say, 4 or 9?
Well, actually, I had originally sought to get the appointment to the 10th Court of Appeals. However, the Chief Justice, Tom Gray, was from Waco. Another judge was from Waco. I did get an interview with the governor's office, and I did not get that appointment. They appointed someone out of McLennan County. So a lot of prayer. Had a mentor who's, she's Dr. Mary Lee Henderson out of Waco, Texas, and she's like, you know, what are you going to do about this? So I spent more time in prayer and really felt that this was a direction I was supposed to take. My husband is very supportive of me and has really encouraged me to pursue being a judge. It's a passion that I've had. I feel it's a calling. It's not just a job. I've always had a heart for the Constitution. I worked with Phyllis, was her National Judicial Reform Chairwoman. Also was awarded by the National Eagle Forum for my work in support of the United States Constitution as a young person. Was in my 20s when I got that award. So this is something I've always wanted to do, and at this point in my life, you know, I feel like I have the life experience, I feel like I have the legal experience, and I am a leader. And so I think it'll make a difference.
Why this particular appeals, CCA appeals place 3?
The particular place?
Yeah.
Oh,
Rather than
well,
4 or 9.
I felt like Bert was the least qualified on the court. I looked at all 9 judges. I felt like he had the least qualifications out of the 9. At the time when I was looking, I didn't even give thought to the fact that there were only 3 up for re-election. And so that's the reason I chose to run against him at the time, so originally.
Oh, okay. All right. Larry?
And your practice, your private practice is in Waco?
Yes, sir, it's in Waco.
And that's where you live, obviously?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Waco. Could you explain to the people that will be watching this, explain the Court of Criminal Appeals, how, you know,
Sure.
there's so many courts, and how does that work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it's a question I'm getting as I'm campaigning. So you have your county courts at law, and then you also have your district courts. So where you can have both civil and criminal cases heard, and then after the case, from there, that case can be appealed to one of the 14 Court of Criminal Appeals. So you can look at it as 3 tiers: county courts at law and district courts. Then we have 14 courts of appeal across Texas, and you can appeal to those courts. And then you have the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the highest criminal court in Texas. That's kind of the simplified version.
Okay, great. All right. Bob?
There was a question on here about civil asset forfeitures, and being from Waco, with the massacre that took place a couple of years ago, with all of the things from bikers, things that were, there was no due process, period. What is your feeling about due process and civil asset forfeitures?
Well, I think the Constitution is very clear. It says you can't take property without due process. I mean, there's just no question about it. You know, it's plain. And, you know, after I filled this questionnaire out, I'd not experienced any major problems in this area in representing clients. I had some parents where their vehicles had been seized as a result of a child driving that vehicle, but was able to resolve those issues usually by talking to the local district attorney. I've also had phone calls about cases like that where I wasn't representing the family, where they were asking about what to do. So it's very difficult once your property is seized to get it back. I do know that. So I think it's unfair. I think if you're not charged with the crime, and I think if you are charged with the crime even, that you still need due process of law, and especially if it's a vehicle that you're depending on for transportation or money that you're depending on to pay your bills. I was aware of a case out of East Texas after looking at your questionnaire where they took money off this guy and never charged him. So I just think it's not right.
Is there something that, as a judge, that you can do to convince the legislature to clamp down on the laws?
Well, one thing I was looking at recently was that the Court of Criminal Appeals and the Texas Supreme Court formulate the rules for appellate procedure. We also set forth the rules of evidence. So if there was possibility in those procedural rules to make recommended changes to the legislature, I think that would, that would be something to consider, to look at those rules and to see where we are, what might can be done, obviously. But we can't, there's a limit on what we can do as a judge. Obviously, I think as a judge, you can uphold the Constitution of the United States. It's pretty straightforward. So.
Okay, thank you.
Following up on that, what recourse does a citizen who has been denied due process have against the organization that violated due process? What recourse does a citizen have?
I think their recourse is rather limited at this point because of the doctrine of sovereign immunity. So.
Yeah, and that's not a good answer. Okay, I mean, that's the right answer, but it's not a good answer.
I understand what you're saying, yeah. So, yeah,
Okay.
there's not much
It's not a
recourse at this
solution.
point. Yeah, it's
No.
definitely not a solution. I agree.
Okay, so what happens to your current practice once you are elected?
Oh, I will not be able to continue to practice law, so the current cases that I have will be referred out to other attorneys.
Okay, just hand off and
Yes,
close down the
that's
shop.
correct. And right now, I'm not taking a lot of new cases because I'm traveling 5 to 6 days a week campaigning. I literally am home about 2 days a week, so.
Okay, and that kind of dovetails into my next quick question. Are you going to have to move from Waco to Austin to
That's
fulfill
my
the
plan.
obligations?
Yes, that is the plan, would be to move to Austin. So I could commute, it's about an hour and 10 minutes commute, but I think my preference is to move, and that's what I'm planning on doing, my husband and I both.
Okay, that was my question. Is he okay with that? So yeah, he's going with you, okay.
Absolutely. He's the one that got me into this.
Okay, David?
So in Montgomery County, we had a Texas Open Meeting Act violation, and it was subsequently thrown out of court and ruled unconstitutional. But we had a rule and run judge, and can you comment on why it's so difficult, do you think, to get a atonement act that will actually hold up in court? And then do you think the rule and run, the visiting judges, is that being abused to avoid controversial court cases in local communities?
Oh, so you're saying, I'll make sure I understand your question, that on a complicated case, the sitting local judge is not available, and then a visiting judge comes in and makes these rulings.
Makes these rulings, yes.
Oh, I've not been aware of that. Of course, with regard to the criminal docket, what you see is usually the judges, in my experience, have genuinely been on vacation in both counties I practice in. So, but I don't think that if there's an abuse of that process, I would say it would need to be addressed, definitely. Of course, the Open Meetings Act is very important. And as a city attorney, I had exposure to dealing with that. And I think it keeps people honest, and it keeps government transparent. It's very much needed. So.
Why is it so difficult to, you know, the legislature modified that act in the last session, but we hear by local representatives that they're not sure it's gonna pass again. I mean, it's not gonna pass, you know, through the courts to be enforced. Why are we having difficulty defining, you know, what's a meeting?
Well, we had a law that had been in effect and upheld for years by the Supreme Court. So, and then they struck down that law, sent it back to the legislature, and I guess the legislature made some modifications to it from what I understand. So I was keeping up with that because I was interested in that. That's actually one of the things I followed, but I have not heard any discussions or read any articles about the new open meetings law being struck down again or not meeting some constitutional standard. I thought personally what we had in place for decades was a good law. And so that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah.
Let me go back to your comments saying you selected this position because you feel that Judge Richardson is at least qualified. So if I'm an executive CEO and we're on the elevator together and I'm like, Gina, I hear you're running for office. Why are you running for this office? And I had heard you said that, you know, that sitting judge is maybe the least qualified, so you're gonna go in there. What makes you a stronger judge candidate than what he is right now as an incumbent?
Well, the short answer is I think he'll be more akin to a Roberts, and I'm going to be more like a Scalia. I have the intestinal fortitude to stand up under political pressure and make the right decisions. And he's proven that he hasn't done that. In the case involving Rick Perry, he was the presiding district court judge in that case. When Rick Perry was indicted as a result of threatening to veto the Travis County Public Integrity Unit's funds as a result of the attorney that was in charge of that getting a DWI and being just totally drunk. So Governor Perry said that he was going to veto those funds unless they removed her from office, basically. And so as a result of that, what happened is they used the criminal law to attack someone in a political position, and Justice Richardson presided over that case. It took 4 times of the grand jury to get an indictment in that case. So I feel like it was a straightforward decision. In fact, all 8 of Judge Richardson's peers reversed him at the Court of Criminal Appeals level, the current Court of Criminal Appeals. And what Justice Newell said is this is straightforward. It doesn't matter who's involved, Governor Perry or anybody else. This is clearly a separation of powers issue, the right of the governor to veto. Now look, that's everything that we don't agree or believe in as conservatives. He, as a judge at that district court level, according to his peers, he did not act decisively. And I believe it's because of all the political attention that that case was getting across the nation. I mean, this was a hotly contested case. And the other thing I read is that he actually appointed a former boss of his as the prosecuting attorney. So right there, there's a built-in conflict of interest. So I believe he was compromised there. And then on a case in Waco, Texas, we had a capital murder case where he also served as a district court judge. It took him 7 years to render an opinion in a murder case. That's a long time.
How is that possible?
That's a good question. I've asked the same thing. I don't know how you would drag out. I haven't experienced that in any case that I've had where a judge takes forever that long, you know, to render any kind of opinion. So, and especially when you can ask for briefs from the attorneys involved in the case, I mean, which would expedites what you need to do as a judge to write the opinion. So, yeah, I don't know, but right at 7 years. In fact, the way I found out about that was my the journalist that covers the news in Waco, you know, he brought it up to me and said, hey, did you know this happened? And a lot of people were really upset in our community. That was out in McLennan County. So I think he seems like a nice enough man, but there's a difference, I think, when it comes to real leadership. I think in a judge, you want somebody who is going to be principled. They're going to stick to their principles. They're going to stand up for what's right, and they're going to be uncompromising. And I think that is the biggest difference between Burt Richardson and myself.
Okay, great, thank you.
As a prosecutor, how do you, if you become a judge, do you flip a switch and all of a sudden you're not leaning towards prosecuting somebody and leaning that way to make a decision as the judge?
I think one of the things that's different too between my opponent and myself is that I've been on both sides of the bench. I've been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and that gives you a totally different perspective because you've seen both sides of it. My initial hopes were to be a career prosecutor, but I wasn't willing to dismiss repeat offense DWIs in order to do that. So I became a criminal defense attorney. My belief is that the system works when we have people of integrity involved in that system, whether you're a prosecutor or whether you're a defense attorney or whether you're a judge. One of the things that in my practice, I felt like my job was more than being an attorney. I felt like I was also providing good counsel and advice to my clients. And I would tell them, I'd point to my diploma and I'd say, this diploma says that I am an attorney and counselor at law. So for the attorney part, you have to pay. For the counselor part, that's free. And I witnessed to a lot of people. Actually, I would share my faith, take people to church. Probably the thing where I felt like I had made the most difference as a criminal defense attorney outside of just practicing law was helped a lot of young people get into rehab centers. I was very engaged in that. Spent a lot of time doing that, especially young people where parents were very concerned. Like I said, I did a lot of juvenile law. And as a result of that, also started a dental manufacturing company where we give repeat offenders second chances at jobs. And that's how that company came about. It's one of the reasons I started Dental Creations. That's a dental manufacturing company that my brother, to answer your prior question, will be running. And my manager, we also support international missions, and then 5% of all the proceeds go to the CareNet online proceeds go to the CareNet Pregnancy Center in Waco. So, but that came out of my practice of law, that company did, trying to help people that were my clients. So if they get out of jail and they've served their time, they need a job. And so that's how it didn't change who I was. My integrity as a prosecutor to do the job I'd committed to the people of Texas to do was there. And then my integrity toward my clients and toward the judicial system. Our Constitution, our system of justice, and doing the right thing has to be more important than making money. And so that's how I practice and that's how I live.
So how long as a prosecutor and then how long as a defense?
I was about 3 years as a prosecutor, and then ever since then, I've been since 91, I've been doing criminal defense work.
Okay.
I had it all figured out and I lost it. The biggest case in Texas history, which to me should have never taken place, was Roe V Wade. It started in Texas, ended up in the U.S. Supreme Court, and you mentioned separation of powers. A judge is not one that creates law in the courtroom. The judge is supposed to uphold the Constitution.
True.
So how do you feel about the Supreme Court making it law for Roe v. Wade?
Well, it goes back to substantive due process, which came from the Dred Scott case, which even Abraham Lincoln came out against at the time. So because he said once you go down this slippery slope with substantive due process, the judges can pick whatever they want to be substantive due process rights. So ever since Roe v. Wade, there's been over 100 other cases that have relied on substantive due process. So what that creates, it's allowed the Supreme Court and even the lower federal courts, and I guess even state courts to a certain extent, to legislate from the bench, to undo the will of the people at the ballot box. So the people vote someone into office, and then based on substantive due process, we create the right to abortion, You know, we take away prayer in school, all these various things. You know, we create the right, you know, the recent case involving same-sex marriage was also based on the substantive due process. So when you start looking at all of that, it has been a slippery slope. And I like what Phyllis Schlafly had pointed out in one of her books. She said that one way to do that is you can limit what the federal courts hear, even the Supreme Court, based on Article 1 and Article 3 of the Constitution. But it would take some courage on the part of Congress and the Senate to act to make that happen. It's been done before. You know, they've done that in the past, historically. So they can do it, and that's one way, is to limit, you know, what they have jurisdiction over.
So for the three powers of government, do you feel that the Supreme Court is the supreme power over the other two?
Well, I think the people are the power. Actually, I think the power rests in the people, but no, they're three equal branches of government. And so unfortunately, at this point, I think in reality, the courts have until recently really been the supreme branch of government due to all this substantive due process and all this legislating from the bench. That's why I was involved with being a chairman of the National Judicial Reform for Eagle Forum, because, you know, it's not just about my values as a conservative. It's about valuing the Constitution. Whether you're a conservative or a liberal, anytime you start legislating from the bench, you're undermining the will of the people. You're undermining the separation of powers. You're destroying everything that our country was founded on. I don't care which side of the fence you're on. So I was very engaged, not just because of my conservative values, but because of my love for the Constitution. It's really sad what's happened. I'm hopeful that all these new appointees will get back to following the rule of law.
So far, have they?
Not everybody, I don't think. So we'll see how things work. So you know, I'm amazed at how we make appointments and all these people are, you know, supposed to uphold the rule of law, and then when they get on the bench, it seems like things change, unfortunately.
Okay, one of the questions, to what extent do you believe state or federal government should be able to obtain court orders, you know, having to do with parental control? And your answer was kind of textbook, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
Let me give you a couple specifics and try to get your viewpoints on those. The first one is the topic of vaccinations. I'm sure you've read much on it, very much in the news lately and so forth. Should schools be able to deny enrollment for a child who is not vaccinated?
No, they
That's a
should not.
parental decision,
Absolutely is.
but that is a current school policy.
No, I totally believe parents have the right to determine whether or not they're going to vaccinate their children. I mean, that's pretty much, I don't have children, but my brother, they didn't vaccinate their children, so I would go to bat for him to have the right not to vaccinate his children.
Okay, and then also the Drake Pardo case.
Yes, I
where,
kept up with that.
And there's a new medical practice. I was trying to do some research on that case, and there's a new medical practice where this specialization of doctors who evaluate those cases, and if you want to say probable cause that it's parental neglect or abuse or something of that nature. And that seems to be at the root of a number of these cases. It seems to have been one of the things which led to the Drake Pardo case. So again, CPS is stepping in, and what do we do? I know CPS reform has been a legislative issue, probably always will be. Do you have any specific recommendations on how we approach that? You're not a judge yet, so you can render those opinions.
I'd have to agree with you about that last statement. So, and I don't think I would be involved in that particular case, in that particular type of case. But I believe that parents should be the ones that make decisions for their children, not the government, not ever. So, you know, unless a child is literally beaten or sexually abused, you know, I don't see where the government should be stepping in and removing children from their parents, like in that particular case you mentioned. So And, I think that could be a growing problem too, so that even gives me more concern, when you see what's happening. Because we have such a divide in our society over what we believe. So, if you don't have laws in place and we don't strengthen the protection for parents, it's gonna be, I think, you're gonna see a lot more of the abuse. So I absolutely, unequivocally support a parent's right to make decisions that are in the best interest of their children, whether it's homeschooling, whether it's vaccinations, whatever that decision might be. I believe that you don't need to violate the sanctity of the home and the sanctity of a parent's rights.
Okay, I got a lot more questions, but it's David's turn.
Back to the visiting judge issue. So apparently Bert Richardson was a visiting judge
He was,
when he made that ruling. We had the
Yes.
Toma case, we had a visiting judge. It
yes.
seems like these difficult political decisions are being handed off to non-elected visiting judges.
Now that you point that out, this is true. Yeah, that is what happened in the Perry case, and I guess also, I'm not sure why there was a specially appointed judge on the murder case in Waco, but, obviously he was appointed to that position as well, so. And that really takes away power from the local people when you have a visiting judge come in.
Something on what I guess some people, Judge Richardson called it the residence in case. It was a voter fraud case where we had one of our grassroots conservatives and 9 others moved into a hotel to vote from there to vote in a local
Mud district
district.
with 2 residents.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And won the election, and the other folks filed appeal. The visiting judges were coming in. It's like, our own guys don't stand up, on these cases. And so, like David said, that seems to be a problem anyway.
Never heard the term rule and run, but apparently that's.
Yeah, well,
That's sad.
and our guy ended up in prison serving 6 months until our state rep got involved, and we had hundreds of people sign petitions and, to get him out. And it was a railroad deal by a local politician, and it kind of went up to the top there.
That's sad.
Yep.
Well,
So,
they probably need to make some changes to how these judges are appointed and under what circumstances they're appointed.
Well, that's been one of the issues, in that the visiting judge can be a judge that has been removed from office or
Right.
not elected.
This is true.
Again, because he was a judge that people didn't have confidence in, and they get to come back, and we, the people, have no say-so.
That's true.
In our questionnaire, we had a question. Are the United States and Texas Constitutions living documents? Please answer in the context of progressive versus originalist. You did answer that the Texas and the United States Constitution are not living documents. The Constitution be interpreted based on its original meaning and at the time it was written, and should not be subject to changing whims of society. And then you go on about Justice Scalia. Could you answer that in the context of progressive or versus originalism?
Well, I think we should follow the original text of the Constitution. And so, there's another quote by Scalia where he says, it's the text, it's the text, it's the text. And I love that quote too, that's in my answers there. Basically, Scalia said the Constitution is dead, dead, dead. So that's one of my favorite quotes by him. And it is not a living document. We want to follow the original meaning or original text. Even when you even venture over into meaning, I think you can, kind of get away from the original text of the Constitution. So.
And that next question, basically we ask, please specifically address how many days a year the court will be in session. How does that work?
I thought that was interesting. So the information you had in your question, I believe I believe it was in your questionnaire about how they're not in panel during 2 months of the year. Was that in your questionnaire? Am I confusing it with somebody else's maybe? I read that somewhere that in July and August they're working, but they don't meet to make decisions, I guess, so to speak. So, but they are working. Maybe it wasn't your questionnaire. They're all starting to run together, I have to tell you. So, but, well, I think that we should be working year round. I mean, that's what we're elected to do. It's a job. Just like if I go work for somebody and they hire me, this is what you're gonna do, and you get this many days off sick, this many days of vacation, and the rest of the days you should be working. That's my opinion. I don't know if I'm answering your question, or addressing what your concern is.
No, I just wondered, what's the norm, I wonder?
Well, I think everybody, my understanding, because I've asked other judges on with the court, now some people work from home, but I've not heard anything negative about anyone serving on the court that's not doing their job. You know, they have to be there on Mondays because they conference, and then 1 week out of the month they're in panel to hear cases, from what I understand. This is what I've been told. So, and then I think there are a couple of the judges that actually work from home on the other days, but they are working. So that's what I've been told.
Okay.
I don't know. I know I plan to be there, so I can answer that question for you. I'll probably be there and be working after hours and all weekend. That's pretty much how I operate. So.
Okay.
Well, it's understandable not to be in an office constantly,
True.
especially with as much reading as has to be done and research that you have to do. And you can
Right.
do that from home on the
True.
computer just as easy as you can in the office.
You can, and probably more effectively sometimes.
Yeah, there's less yeah. So with all the changes in our culture, and we brought up a few of them with taking the Bible out of the schools, taking prayer out of the schools, and with abortion, and with the gay, lesbian, transgender, all of the rest of that stuff. We have another thing that we're having to worry about constitutionally, and that's Sharia law. How do you feel that Sharia law plays into the U.S. Constitution or Texas Constitution?
No, I think it has no place. So the law of the land is the United States Constitution, the Texas Constitution, and the laws of, say, the state of Texas or whatever state you're living in. So their laws do not take precedent over our laws. And if they don't like something, they can do like everyone else. They can go to the legislature and ask for whatever relief or whatever changes that they want to take place. So that's my personal opinion.
Well, it's a religious law, so what part,
It is.
how does that play into any part of our state law or our national law? Is because it's religious.
Well, I
It's
mean, they
an
can practice their
organization.
faith, but they have to still comply with the laws of the United States or the
Right.
laws of Texas. I mean, they can't, kill their spouses, like they might do in some of these other countries. I mean, we read about this. So, whatever the issue might be, or, you have the issue of genital mutilation.
Right.
That's a real prominent issue right now. So, they are subject to the laws of the United States.
But we don't, getting somebody to report that is
Right,
tough.
it's true.
It's going on in our state right now, so.
We got about 2 minutes. Wow. Dale?
Okay, you said some pretty clear words that concerning reforming criminals and recidivism. Said it's a real problem. So what do you recommend? You've been a political activist, heavily involved in the Republican Party. Over the course of years, have you submitted resolutions that would resolve this or address this? What would you recommend?
For
To be done.
lowering the recidivism rate.
Well, for addressing that whole issue of reforming criminals.
Well, I think one of the things that's currently happening, and I think it's working, this is, what we're told statistically that it's working. There's been a real move to have a separate court for, say, DWI court. We have a DWI court in McLennan County, and I think in Bell County it's called a DWI drug court, like if you had a marijuana charge, a misdemeanor marijuana charge. And they're also doing it, I think, in the Tarrant County area. And those programs are turning out to be very successful. They're strict, the program itself is geared toward working with someone who has a DWI. They have maybe an alcohol problem. There's a lot of they're screened to be in the program. Once they're in the program, there's a lot of reporting. There's a lot that they have to do. And, I was reading an article that said the recidivism rate is really, really low for people who participate in these programs. And so, I don't have those statistics, but I have read that those programs are working. That's what I've been told. I think that is an excellent way to take care of things, is to get people into drug and alcohol treatment and to get the help they need if it's an addiction. On a personal level, I have not proposed any laws. I think this is a good answer for one reason. I think this proposal that someone else put out there is working. They also have veterans courts now. I think that's excellent. I'm
Montgomery County.
totally for that. I had a lot of people, because I practice in McLennan and Bell County, and Bell County, there are a lot of veterans. Fort Hood is there in Bell County. And, post-traumatic stress disorder is real.
Mm-hmm.
And they're even finding now that it has physiological roots to it as well. And I read an article in a medical journal about that. And so, depending on, how close the soldier was, say, to an explosion. And there's so much research that's happening. So you have the traumatic brain injury cases, you have post-traumatic stress disorder, all of these things. And I personally saw, in dealing with clients, I'm not a kind of lawyer that meets with you for 15 minutes, collects a fee. I'm engaged and really work with my clients. And I worked with these soldiers to help them. And I guess one of the most rewarding cases I had was a soldier who told me, you really cared. You really cared about me, and you helped me turn my life around. And that was through our Veterans Court, through working with him and the social worker through the Veterans Court. And it really made a difference. And I think those kind of programs that are more specialized, rather than a cattle call with all these people in line to do a plea bargain, are much more effective. And then back to, on a personal level, that's why I started Dental Creations. This manufacturing company, my brother also helped me with that, is I would help people. They would go to church maybe, get off of drugs or alcohol, but because they were convicted felon, they couldn't get a job. And if you can't get a job, you can't support yourself, there's a certain level of oppression that comes with that can also lead to poverty. And so that's why I started my company. One of the main reasons was to give people in life a second chance. And,
How many people are employed there now?
there are 8 or 9 of us now. We've had a lot of change recently, but a lot of people come and go. They don't all make it. But I have someone on staff now that's been with me for a while, and couldn't ask for better. So we doesn't matter what they're convicted of, just that they make a commitment when they come in that they're going to say, I'm going to work and I'm going to, I'm going to put effort into changing my life. So a lot of them go back to drugs, I have to tell you.
Can the legislature do anything to promote those types of things?
Well, there's a group called Unlocking Doors that Christina, I'll make sure I'm saying her last name right. It's I knew her husband Nate Crane, the Cranes. I can't think of her last name, but they have a program where they work to train employers. They also work with pastors and leaders in churches to help them with drug rehab programs. I think we have to engage the church. I think we have to get the church engaged in the process of reaching out and helping people overcome these addictions. So, after all, that's in my opinion, what the gospel's about. It's about the hope we have in Christ and that He can help us overcome.
Okay.
So, dental creations, any of the products you sell have a FDA 510K, are they?
We have one now that we're looking at getting a 510K on, which is, we're kind of on pause because it's daunting and very expensive. But I've had a lot of regulatory challenges over a refrigerant called 134A refrigerant. So, and that came through during the Obama administration, but then the Trump administration reversed some of the regulations, which means now, it was a $6 difference in the raw material cost of our product, that one regulation per item.
Wow.
So it adds up. So yeah, it was a big deal.
So does your factory meet the GMP?
No, we actually, on that kind of item, we normally outsource the specs and then they're sent in to us. So we have we're in compliance with all of we probably could, I just haven't done it because of the expense. It's very expensive. Even all the current, they made a lot of changes with barcoding and there are a lot of regulatory changes, the globally harmonized code and all of that it's a real challenge for small businesses. So
You guys to run a GMP factory?
yeah, that's a challenge. I'm impressed. Maybe I need advice from you. Yeah.
I'm done.
We got a few minutes. You said you had a bunch of questions.
And I've got at least one more over here.
All right.
Back on the civil forfeiture issue. Obviously, there are a lot of what we'll call abuses. As a judge, what criteria would you apply? What would you be looking for if they brought to you a proposed forfeiture? And what criteria would you apply to grant or deny that?
Well, first of all, you need to, in my opinion, you should have an underlying criminal charge before you just start seizing people's property. So unless someone has been charged, I don't think that we should be able to seize their property, or unless they've been arrested. I'll at least say that, unless there's an arrest. And then, maybe you would, I don't know legislatively what they would do to make changes to do this, but maybe you would require a probable cause for arrest, and what you're supposed to do anyway, and then that they would need to be charged within a reasonable amount of time, whether it's 30 days or 60 days or whatever the legislature would deem appropriate. But that would be one thing I would be looking at. Is there any evidence of any wrongdoing of a crime, of a criminal offense? There are elements of an offense. There's intention. You can intentionally, knowingly, recklessly commit an offense. What are the various elements of that offense? Were those elements present? Obviously, you're not trying the case, but you're looking to see, on the surface as to whether or not I'm talking about the initial taking of the assets and what you would do. And then if you were having a hearing, to me, I just don't see where it would ever be right to take someone's property if they're not charged with a criminal offense. I think you would need, that the law should be that there is if the city thinks that I've done something wrong, let's say, at a city level, and whether it's criminal in nature or not, there should be a law that supports any action against me. And then they should have to pursue that in court where I have the right to have an attorney, where I can hire someone to represent me. And rather than just come in and take thousands of dollars worth of assets without any kind of due process. I just don't see where that's the right thing. It's surely not what the founders intended in the Constitution. There's one sentence, and I forget which article it's in, where it's very clear that will not happen. And that's the way that reads.
Can you ever conceive of a situation where you would be in favor of a taking before there's a conviction?
No.
Right answer.
Bob?
I'm good.
Okay. Done? Okay. So why don't we go ahead and wrap it up now, if you want to do a closing, and then we'll finish up.
Okay. Well, I hope I've answered all your questions, and especially yours, Paul. So you had some good questions there about parents and various things. So I hope I've addressed all your questions. I want to thank y'all for your time. I think that this kind of group is really what will keep America strong and will help us, where we're off course, get back on course. And I just want to reassure you that I do have experience. If I could just take a second, John, to say this. You know, we look at, have I sat on the bench? No, I have not. I have sat in a quasi-judicial role as chairman and commissioner of TD Alarm, but every day I practice criminal law. I've met with criminals in my office, and I've had thousands and thousands of hours of experience in the courtroom in front of all these same judges who have judicial experience doing the same thing basically the judges are doing, you know, presenting a case, you know, writing motions, they're ruling on the motions, I'm doing the work preparing the motion, or I'm doing the work going to trial trying the case, you know, so I'm engaged in the same process as an attorney and representing my clients and running a business, which, you know, a lot of times people get on the bench and they don't have any kind of business background, and you have to have strong administrative skills for this court, and I think I have those skills. And more importantly, I think what is more important than experience is integrity, and like I said earlier, the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing. I do have a love and a passion for the Constitution, which is seen in my commitment throughout the years of service. I've served, you know, in a lot of different capacities with Eagle Forum, also, you know, in our own party, in the Republican Party, in various roles. And so I'm committed to uphold the rule of law, and I will tell you, I'll give you my word that I will never legislate from the bench. And I believe in the power of the people, and I certainly believe in doing the right and just thing, whether it's parents' rights or civil asset forfeiture, or whether you're talking about the issues you were addressing with these, what did you call them, run and rule visiting judges. You know, a lot of these things I won't be able to fix as a judge, as y'all all know. So these are matters for the legislature, and I would encourage you to, you know, take it up with the legislature. Now, there may be some things that the Court of Criminal Appeals could look at in terms of rules of evidence, or maybe appellate rules of procedure. I can't address that really until, you know, maybe a matter is before us that we're looking at. But I'm telling you, doing the right thing, doing what is just, doing what is right in all these situations that preserves the right of the people, that is one of the most important things, I think, that, you know, that's what I believe in. I believe without the rule of the people that it's just, you know, you ask me what the top, which one is supreme, the Constitution, the Supreme Court, the executive branch or the legislative branch, I think the people are supreme. That's just the bottom line. And so anytime we keep power with the people and we preserve those rights, whether you're a judge or a legislator, or whether you're the President of the United States, at the end of the day, long term, we're preserving what we know here in America as the greatest nation on earth. We're preserving that legacy for our children and our grandchildren, and that is my commitment to you.
All right, great, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you coming in.
No problem.
Good
Nice
luck
to
in
meet
your
you guys.
campaign. Yeah, good luck in your campaign.
So what's the
Thank
next
you.
stop?